Blog Talk Radio.
Aziz, Aziz.
Coming across loud and clear?
You come across loud and clear, and we are live. So, how you doing?
Well, I'm doing good, Crystal. I'm doing good. It's been a tough week this week. We got a lot of information that came in on the COVID-19 vaccine, and kind of eager to get into it. So,
yeah, me too.
I'm going to give respect to you first because this is your show.
Oh. Well, thank you. Our show. I'm just perform with.
Well, you're the producer. You're the producer. Okay, I think we got Jerry Carr on standby.
Let's see here. Okay, I got you on the line, and so should we give him a call or let him call in? What do you think is best?
Well, I told him that he could go ahead on and call in and listen to the show. But if you don't, I text you his phone number. So if you don't get a call from him, it might be a good idea to go ahead on and give him a call.
Well, John, do you want to? So I titled this show, "What does the COVID vaccine mean for Black people in West Virginia?" And I put a little show note in here that says, Black people in America have questions about the COVID vaccine. Many people are skeptical. Many people are excited. What does this mean to and for Black people in West Virginia? So, it has been a busy week, and I've also put in the show notes there too, the Gazette article that just came out, talking about how West Virginia is not counting COVID cases by race. So I do want to get some thoughts around that.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Well, you gave me an assignment. Okay, you asked me to go out and do a survey, and I did go out and do a survey. I asked people specifically, where do you get your information on COVID-19? And we got a bunch of different responses. I got that people got their information from CNN, the CBC website. Some people did their own Google search and investigated themselves, which is one of the things that I do myself. Okay. Mm-hmm. And surprisingly, though, no one said they got their information from social media. Okay, which again, that surprised me. Okay, but it was real interesting. One young lady in particular told me that she didn't mind taking the vaccine.
We've got Dr. Carr. Let me bring him in real fast here.
Okay.
Let's see. Hello, Dr. Carr. Let's see. Hello.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt y'all, so I didn't know when to press on.
No. Hello. Welcome.
Man, it's good to hear from y'all. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt y'all. I'm listening too.
No, we're just getting started.
That's
How
all
are
right, Dr.
you?
Carr.
So we have Dr. Carr on the line. Who else do we have? Do we have another caller?
It's Nicole.
Hi, Nicole. Hi.
All right.
Hey.
All right, Miss Nicole, what's the car?
Yes, so listen, so, we just kind of think of this platform as an old school party line, where we're all on
Oh, yeah.
here. I don't know if you were as excited as I was when you got a beep on your phone and you could click over and it would be your other friend. That was like magic to me. So we kind of think of it this way. So John was kicking us off and just kind of sharing a little bit about what we're going to talk about today and some of the things that he discovered this week through a survey. So John, if you want to say your hellos,
I'll finish that up.
Pick it back up.
Okay. Yeah. Well, again, Crystal had asked me to go out and speak to people in reference to doing the survey about where they were getting their information from, and most of the people got their information from a variety of different areas, Google, CNN, the CBC website. But there was one specific young lady that I asked about the COVID vaccine, and she was an employee at Walmart, as a matter of fact, and she told me that she didn't have a problem taking the vaccine and that it couldn't be any worse than any other vaccine that might have side effects. And I found that interesting. Again, she said that she got most of her information from CNN on the COVID-19 vaccine. And at this time, Dr. Carr, and I'm going to take over and say that I'd like for you and your wife, who is a healthcare professional at WVU Medicine, to give us your background and your titles and your background and why we can count on you to give us authentic information on the COVID-19 vaccine.
Oh, no problem. I mean, the biggest thing with us is it's not that neither one of us actually is involved in the development of the vaccine or anything like that. It's just that we've been putting ourselves in contact with people who have knowledge and trying to find good information to get to people. So backing up for a second, my name is Jerry Carr. I'm not an MD. I'm actually a PhD physicist. That's my background, and I'm a scientist. But the reality is, I'm also the president of the local Morgantown branch of the NAACP. So what goes on with my community is very, very important to me, and it's also very important to my wife too, who is our health committee chair in the NAACP. And I'm actually going to let her introduce herself from there, if that's all right, ma'am. Are you able to get on the line for us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
All right. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, my name is Nicole Wilson Carr, and I am a family nurse practitioner. I've been in practice for 20 years. I've worked with adults and kids, and I am the health chair for our local Morgantown Kingwood NAACP, and definitely what Gary has said is our main goal is to make sure that people get facts and use those facts to make an informed decision when it comes to the COVID-19 vaccine that'll probably roll out optimistically in March per the governor, but soon to come, we'll say that.
Okay, I gotcha. And the one thing I got to say about Nicole is, like, she's the intersection of knowledge and passion. It's amazing when you're looking for healthcare providers that they have our interest in mind because they're one of us, but also a good look at that knowledge and being able to discern things. So I've been very appreciative of the work that she's done. She's been bringing people to talk to our community, everything from our public health director, Lee Smith, to public health officials at WVU Medicine, and also infectious disease experts actually at local at WVU, all the way to the coronavirus czar, Clay Marsh, and also because we want to make sure that people know that we're thinking about Black people. We also got our state president Owens Brown in there too in a nice conversation. You can find these conversations on our Facebook page, but we got more coming because we know that this is a continuous conversation. I mean, the facts change daily, right? So we got to make sure that we're bringing things as often as we can. So I just want to throw that in there too. I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely.
I just want to say, yay science. Dr. Carr and Mrs. Carr. Nicole, you all know I'm a nerd. You know, I don't have any credentials. I just love science. And you know what? This is really where I think, you know, this conversation is so important because there's so much concern about the vaccine because of the lack or the history of Black Americans and the science trials of Tuskegee. We've heard that, but also this is just an opportunity for me to just, you know, throw a plug in there for our STEM programs and, you know, for young people to look at science, because if we had more Black doctors, you know,
right.
MDs and PhDs and all the way around, which is actually what prompted this conversation. John and I wanted to talk to Black healthcare professionals in West Virginia, right? And there's not a link to go find that, okay? Maybe we will create that, but you know, John did some due diligence and we found ourselves here with you all. And I think that this is so important because one of the things is, you know, making these connections in all the areas where we can, whether that's this conversation on Facebook, writing op-eds, you know, we all have to do our part. So thank you for the work that you all are doing. And just happy to have some science nerds in here.
Yeah, you
I
know,
was just
Crystal,
going to say that.
Go ahead, Nicole. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think it's really good that John went out and just did like a community survey on, you know, where people were and what they were thinking. And I was happy to hear that the young lady from Walmart said she was looking at CNN, and that helped give her some confidence in terms of proceeding with the COVID-19 vaccine. CNN did a really good program just a couple of nights ago called The Color of COVID. And they had Jerome Adams, our Surgeon General. They had Dr. Fauci. And they also had Dr. Gupta, some very good experts on there. And they allowed people to ask questions. And mostly were people of color who asked questions about the vaccine. And they just answered them plain as day, just a conversation. So I think it's really good. Our community is good at getting information. You know, I know there's times we, you know, go down different rabbit holes with Dr. Google, but I know there's times where we know where to go to get the right information. So I was glad to hear that. That sounds wonderful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's
you know, I wanted to get in here and tell you that recently I see where the stats on COVID-19 in the state of West Virginia, they've I think West Virginia is labeled as the third highest increased. I recently seen the most recent report on that, and I also find that the 35 to 40% of West Virginia blacks are skeptical of the vaccine.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And we see where some of the politicians are now doing photo ops in an attempt to get more confidence from the people. And I'd like to get you all to comment on that, you know, in terms of what your perspective would be on that.
Well, I guess my perspective is that, you know, sorry. I think there is a place for that where, you know, politicians and legislators have to go out there and get the shot just to help promote confidence. But I can tell you that there are providers of color who have gotten it within our community, but they're healthcare providers and they're at the front line, so you don't see them out there. These are the ones that we're actually asking to speak to our local Morgantown, Kingwood community and our membership. But I'm telling you, they have been confident. I just spoke to a colleague this morning. She's a cardiologist, a cardiologist of color, and she's getting hers this upcoming week. So they've been working hard at saving lives, okay? And I know we want to see them out there also at the press conference. And we've talked about that. I do listen into the the African American Commission on COVID, the task force that was created through the Herbert Henderson Minority Affairs, and they have said that too, like, where are they? We want to see them as well. And I think Secretary Crouch has heard what we have said. He's asked us actually to call him personally and discuss that. And most people have said, where are the brown people? We want to see them on TV. But I swear to you, they are working very hard to save lives. So it is hard to pull them. But we try. We are trying to get ahead. Hopefully the surge will lessen, give them a break so that they can come out and say, hey, yeah, I got the vaccine and I'm doing well. So far, I haven't heard anything negative about it. I work in an outpatient clinic, so I have not gotten my call at this time, but hopefully in due time I will be on that list. But definitely our ICU, those people who are like right there at the front line dealing with the patients that are high exposure have gotten it, and we haven't heard anything abnormal, unusual so far.
You mentioned earlier that you don't expect. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to throw this out there real quick. I want to take a step back, though. Yeah, we're talking locally. There's a problem in terms of like being able to see visual representation. I love the point that Nicole is making because it doesn't just apply there, but also applies nationally too. I think the NAACP at the national level recognized this, and they made sure to get a COVID vaccine discussion out last week, where they actually invited one of the lead scientists on there, Kizzmekia Corbett. Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett. I mean, she has got her fingerprints on what's coming out with the Moderna vaccine, with that effort. Her research goes all the way through in there, and she didn't just like pop up and was suddenly, just relevant. She's put herself in this position. And again, like I remember reports of her coming out in March of this year, and then I never saw her again. Quite frankly, black media covered it. But not too many other folks did at the time when they were talking about her involvement. Now that we're close to the finish line, we're seeing faces like her and some other faces too. But it's not the key thing to recognize is this wasn't what's the word I'm looking for? Just like a overnight success. It's not that kind of story. It's one where she's putting years into all this. And I just got done watching a piece where she was explaining that FDA requirements have gotten more stringent. So even though this thing was developed faster thanks to the technology that was in play, the reality is they had to go through more hoops than anybody else has probably had to in order to kind of get there. So you got to balance all this, like where the black people, like she said, on like Nicole said, front line, and that's the thing that we got to get into our minds a little bit here.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Nicole mentioned earlier that she doesn't expect the vaccine to be rolled out to the masses of blacks here in West Virginia until, say, March of 2021. Am I clear in saying that?
The governor said that the general public, that's on his plan. The general public, it will be 2021. So I don't know how that's going to work in terms of this whole Pfizer, that announcement about the shortage in terms of more supply with Pfizer and that hiccup. So, but March is what he said. So we just have to be hopeful that, March will be it.
There's a couple of different vaccines. The Pfizer vaccine, but there's how many different other ones are there? Can you name them for me? I know there's Pfizer.
I can't name all of them. I know there's Pfizer and I know there's Moderna. They're both mRNA vaccines, and when you think of mRNA, think of it as it's pretty much when it's injected into you, it will tell each one of your cells, it'll give it a message to make a synthetic copy protein of the spike protein that's on the coronavirus, and your body will respond with an antibody response. So basically, you're making mini soldiers. I love that Dr. Fauci called it that, like mini soldiers that is ready in case of exposure to this virus. So that's how the mRNA vaccine works. I can't remember I know that AstraZeneca had one, and Eli Lilly, Johnson, they also have one, but they work on different mechanism, and I couldn't tell you the details at this time. I don't know if they're gonna launch anytime soon. I'm sure they're probably pushing hard to get their FDA approval, but I don't have the details of those. I can just tell you about the two. Moderna, you can put it in your regular fridge based on the data that's come out. The Pfizer needs to be negative 94 degrees. I remember that during the COVID task force meeting, they mentioned that one of the, Colonel McGonigal, she's an African-American, she said, hey, we got the fridges in West Virginia. So WVU had the fridge, and I think it's CAMC down in Kanawha, and they were just saying, hey, we were ready for it at that time. So they were doing everything they could to make sure it was stored properly. And the pharmacists are pretty much in charge of administering it correctly and making sure it's given out correctly.
Okay. Now, also, Crystal Good, she sent me an article that came out in the Charleston Gazette today, where there was an issue over the reporting. Some people, in terms of the COVID-19 infection, or in reporting it, they were not reporting. Some people were getting categorized as unknown, and Ramelia Parks Hodges said specifically that they need to get that cleaned up because that impacted the funding. When African Americans have been, we are supposedly the ones that get it more than anybody, according to the early reports. So I want to.
I can speak on that
go
a
ahead.
little bit. Ramelia is a really valuable person on that task force, and she is one of the commissioners on the task force, and she has talked to them a lot about that unknown and people not marking it correctly. And she's said many times that there needs to be a stop in terms of when they do registration with the testing, so that you can't go any further in the testing in the line until you fill it all out, which was a good idea. And then there's the gentleman, Martique Washington. I think you guys had him on your show in the past. He's on the other side in Kanawha, and he mentioned at our state meeting that he has also talked to the testers about ways to improve that unknown, to maybe make a blank so that they can be more clearly and to describe more clearly, like, okay, what do you mean by other? What does other mean? And that may help classify or categorize it better. So there are people, there are brown people working very hard because they notice that unknown is rising and we don't know who unknown is. And unfortunately, this is done by private labs. I think it's QI Labs, and you have to work with you can do at the testing site. The registration, the people who do registration need to be more on top of it to say, hey, you didn't fill this out, and give it right back and say you cannot move on to the next step of testing until you fill this out. And I thought that was a wonderful idea by Ramelia. She said it pretty much loud and clear and said, like, registration needs to be fixed. And if you fix that, we'll get, better documentation.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we can count on Ramelia for being loud and clear, and I love that about her and her being an advocate on that task force. And one of the other things that Commissioner Hodges, Ramelia Hodges, said was that, in West Virginia, maybe it's just that the people asking, don't feel comfortable asking. And this kind of circles me back around to what I see in West Virginia being 3% of a white population, that, there is very little conversation around why, how can these white institutions make Black people feel more comfortable. It's kind of what I'm seeing and hearing is there's a call to convert Black folks to, the skepticism. But really where I see the responsibility is on, the history of these institutions, to try to build more trust. And that includes, our elected officials, that are openly getting the vaccine. And I'm glad that they are, because there's a constituency in West Virginia that needs to see that. But when I see that, it doesn't, I'm pro-vaccine. But I'm also trying to think of how is this messaging communicating down? And I think that a lot of the messaging problem is right in what Ramelia said, and that is that, people just don't feel comfortable asking about race or talking about it. I mean, I don't, so those are just my thoughts.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, change
what
the
other
key.
conversation?
Oh, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to say that, yeah, that other conversation has been a plague in us describing our populations for some time in West Virginia. You know, there's got to be a way to do this better and allow people, like you said, that just be forthright. What's wrong with saying that, yeah, I have black and white heritage? What's wrong with being able to say something like that and still get the numbers right? You know, it doesn't, we have the ability to do this. We really do. That other line is just, it's just driving us nuts, to be honest with you. And I got to apologize right now. I know y'all said it's a party line to some degree, so you might hear my kids in the background.
No,
I'll try
that's
not to let them
fine.
say hello too loud,
No.
but they're crazy 5-year-olds. They don't know what they have a whole thing in their head about how this is supposed to go. So
Okay.
crazy.
Nicole, I got to come out and tell you that I myself personally, I'm an Afrocentric, and I have some skepticism with with vaccines in general. So I don't want to limit it to COVID-19. I just have some skepticism with it, and I've never voluntarily got vaccinated for nothing. Okay.
Sure.
And I want to let you guys know that someone sent me a video of a nurse that had just received the COVID-19 vaccine. I'm not sure if it was Pfizer or one of the other ones, but within 17 minutes after receiving the vaccination, she got faint and passed out. Have you guys seen that video?
No, I have not.
I didn't send it.
I would, you know, with that, I don't know, you know, is it a vaccine or is it anxiety? I don't know. And, you know, people, when it comes to like vaccines or any medications we get, there are going to be side effects. Not everybody is the same. So sometimes things do happen. But this is why with this vaccine, the COVID-19 vaccine, you really need to be connected to a healthcare system. You need to have a primary care provider or be connected in some way so that you can let someone know if you're experiencing anything and if it's normal or on the list or needs to be monitored. Unfortunately, within our community, within the African American community, a lot of us do not have primary care providers or connected to a healthcare system. And I'm hoping this pushes it to say, yeah, you need to really be connected so you can be monitored.
Right.
Yeah, with our facility, you know, up here in this facility, you can't get it unless you've had your flu vaccine. So basically they're saying you get that, you wait your 2 weeks, and you get your COVID vaccine, but you're connected with the system where they are monitoring. You have to fill out paperwork because they need to know what's going on with you, what happened, did you get it, are you feeling okay, are you having any issues? So as far as that video, I'm sorry, I don't know about it, and I don't know.
I'm going to give it to you after the
probably
show.
resolved. I'm not sure. But passing out happened with the Gardasil vaccine. I'm sorry to tell you, I worked in peds for a long time, so the HPV vaccine, I remember there was this whole thing out there about, these young girls are passing out, but it was just anxiety. It wasn't the vaccine causing them that. It was just getting hyped up over it. So you have to be monitored. You sit and you wait after you get it, like 15 minutes. Once you're stabilized, we're good to go. So
existing preconditions.
Some side effects.
Existing
but they do call out some side effects, but it's one of those things where it's supposed to resolve after a day or something like that. And it's not everybody. Not everybody gets the side effects. They said small numbers or something to that effect. So it's part of the package. I mean, honestly, this whole conversation is about risk. It really is. We're talking about the risk of getting the vaccine versus the risk of getting the disease. And quite frankly, I know 2020 is coming here. It's made some really terrible choices this year. I mean, where you have to choose whether or not I can see my family or do I need to protect my family. I mean, it just goes down the list. What do I do with my kids when I got to go to work? Like, terrible choices. This is going to be one of those things where it's like, it's another tough choice. But the reality is, what we're comparing is the risk, which one's worse, right? Like these little side effects that we might be hearing about, what might, or versus, getting this thing and watching it kill people. like ridiculously. I mean, right now, I mean, what is it, 2 days ago, it killed like 3,000 people? We're at this clip right now. It's like, it's a mini September 11th. It's a September 11th like every day right now. You know what I'm saying? Like, that is insane. I can't even, oh, man. I mean, and, you know, now I'm talking to somebody who's like got family that's been impacted by this, but it's, I mean, we got to ask ourselves, like, what, we're taking a risk, right? But the reality is, I'm gonna probably choose that 95% effective, like, you know, rate versus taking chances and dealing with the stuff that, like, you know, that almost killed my father, for example. I mean, he's a COVID-19 survivor, and that we only missed that by a couple of days. He would have been dead. He lost 30 pounds in 2 weeks. You know, it's I don't know, man. Like, nobody I know who's had the disease says anything other than if they see a vaccine, they're going to get it, because that disease right there, even if you don't even get sick, they're like, the fear of what can happen is just insane, you know? So I don't know. That's why I would put out there to people who are trying to figure this out, you know?
Yes, sir. I see a new strain has a new strain of the COVID-19 come out. And how much do you know about that? Are we still waiting on more information to come out?
I do think we're still waiting on more information, because I did see that with the UK. But did you see what he did? That Prime Minister locked it down. He said, we're going in a full, you know, stricter lockdown, because guess what? I got information that we got a new strain on board. And unfortunately, new strains can happen when people are resistant to wearing masks and physical distancing. So things like this can happen. I wish that over here on our side in the U.S., they would talk about it a little bit more and say, okay, we need to take care and do something, because that is very serious information to get, that there is a new strain. So I know that with Dr. Corbett, she was concerned about that too. If people didn't take the vaccine, that you're going to have these spots where they're resistant to vaccine, resistant to wearing a mask, and you're starting up making these new strains. And unfortunately, that's what can happen with viruses. They can evolve. So you also got to ask yourself that question. Okay, am I going to not take the vaccine and hope and pray that I don't get this new strain? That is a very scary situation that we need to take seriously. And I wish we'd hear that over here in the U.S., that, you know, stop everything. We need to consider maybe a shutdown of some. So,
and it's very interesting too, because, you know, I'm on the West Coast right now, back and forth, and the difference, right, in being in a city with millions of people, and Los Angeles being the epicenter of, you know, COVID, but the level of seriousness that I see in terms of shutdowns, and then when I look at West Virginia, and I'm like, why are people eating in restaurants, right? Like, why are things happening?
Wow.
It's such a different energy that it's terrifying for me to, you know, for friends and family that. Because, you know, your life is dependent on, you know, another person taking it responsible, or, you know, as much as they can, you know, and I just feel a great sense of carelessness in West Virginia and in America, but this is my home, so I'm paying attention to it. And I just wanted to mention too that, you know, I've been taking this disease very seriously. My baby cousin was the first child in America to die. She died at 5 years old. She's from Detroit.
Oh my God.
Her parents, it was in April of 2020, kind of early in the pandemic, at least, you know, and she was 5 years old. Her mother and father were both first responders, a police officer and an EMT. And, you know, since then, I don't talk about it very much, but I visit her photo often, and I think about, you know, how at that time I was much like the country, thinking, well, you know, I'm not seeing a pandemic, right?
Right.
And then you slowly start to, you know, it comes closer to you, and you think of the children. You know, she was 5 years old. 5 years old. And I think about, you know, and parents were first, you know, and they're the ones need people to be, and
Crystal,
need access.
you're breaking up a little bit, Crystal.
Yeah.
I just remember Scott Herbert, my 5-year-old little baby cousin, that keeps, she stays front of my mind when I think about this vaccine, and I think about, the last time I saw her dancing at our family's event. At our family's event, and how, when we gather, we can't do that anymore because it's irresponsible, right? Like we know that, but I also wonder, in your both of your all's capacities, like with the NAACP, is there any way we can get sort of, self-acknowledged data? I mean, do we know how many Black people in West Virginia have contracted the COVID or have died from COVID? Do we have any idea what those numbers are?
Only what is on the dashboard, and that information is reviewed by one of the epidemiologists on the task force. And he, like you guys have said, he's been concerned that the data is not as detailed as he would like. So I know that the Minority Affairs Task Force, that legislation that has been talked about for so many years, that's hopefully something we're going to try and push for. We do need data. I mean, Marshall has a center, like a Minority Affairs Center, but even the gentleman there has said there's not enough for data for him to evaluate, like, what's going on with us and this virus. So there's definitely a need. We really don't have good data on how to, what's happening with us.
So is there a solution in there with funding or, with the legislature this session to fund the Marshall Health Center for data? I mean, is that something, you mentioned something there, Nicole, about what the legislature could do.
I think we're going to try. I think we're going to try. I think Jerry has started talking to some legislators so far, but it's tough. I mean, we have a super Republican majority, and they're talking about tax reform. That's what's on the agenda. So got to just get their ear and
eliminating the income tax.
Yeah, and our president, Owens Brown has been out there definitely saying that, we need this task force now. Look what's happened to us. So we're trying.
We not only need a task force. Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. We not only need a task force to just exist, but we need them to have power, and that's something that's got to come legislatively as well. And like Nicole was saying, like, this supermajority thing is going to be a weird environment. And the big thing I'm trying to do is talk to as many people on both sides of the aisle to convince them that, man, this isn't just about doing the right thing. I wish everybody felt that way, and that was an important thing when it's all said and done. But the reality is, this is also economic too. There's no way in the world we're going to have a functioning economy if we don't study what's going on with the most marginalized of folks here and learn from these lessons. My goodness, man, when Kristen was talking about Detroit, that's where my family is from, right? And I watched that junk unfold in real time. My condolences, Crystal, with regard to your cousin. My goodness. But like the idea that, what happened in Detroit, let's just be real about it. Like, nobody knew anything. And nobody told them anything. And therefore, guess what? There was a huge amount of people who just got it. And people were dying in the hospital in the hallways where I was born. Like Mount Sinai. It was ridiculous. And it's just like people just got caught off guard. And there's no way in the world that should have went down in a first world country. There's no way in the world. But reality is, that's what's happened. And now, when you talk to people from Detroit now, they are hyper aware, because it's not just about like, oh goodness, it's a city. It's also because they were ran through with this. They were almost destroyed by this. I don't know. But here's the thing. One of the things that keeps happening in history is the Black community gets something And then the white community eventually catches up and sees it, for themselves. Like we had the crack epidemic, right? That's that whole story. And then all of a sudden when it became down to opioids, it was a crisis. But what's happened here with COVID has just been amazing. I mean, it's like, look, man, like it hit the black community hard, and nobody learned anything from it. So therefore, guess what? Now it's a national crisis. We got to stop doing this. We got to start looking at what happens with our people and realizing this thing has lessons that can extend to the whole doggone state, the whole doggone new country, So I this is the way I'm selling things when I talk to people, when I talk to legislatures. I don't know if it's going to get traction, but reality is, hey, elections have consequences, y'all. So please stay tuned. You got 60 days to watch this thing unfold. I don't know what they're going to try to do, but we're going to try our best to be there and stand firm for the right thing, and also try to make it so people can, realize that human rights is connected to the economy, because that might be a story we have to sell. And then we'll just see what happens. But please, people, pay attention and keep staying on top of your elected officials.
Can you just give a little clarity? I just want to ask real fast about the legislature, because it's coming up, and I'm trying to prepare, for how I can, as a Black Guide, cover the legislature. So can you speak to the exact sort of like, what is there a bill that you're trying to create, or what do you mean when you say what are you trying to accomplish? What's the NAACP trying to accomplish this legislative session coming up February?
Oh boy, we're just talking COVID right now. There's all kinds of stuff. But when it comes to, let's just talk about healthcare disparities. We'll just talk about that right now. There was a bill in the past. I believe it's House Bill 2153. I hope I don't have that too off, but that bill never made it out of committee, is my understanding, or it never made it out of that process back in 2019. And it was a bill that was focused on studying healthcare disparities, studying, why is the infant mortality rate, for example, higher in the Black community, like double in the Black community than it is for the majority community in West Virginia. Things like that. I mean, you start pressing, the reality is, when it comes to West Virginia, if you start studying things, you start seeing that there's a transparency issue throughout all these different systems, but not just healthcare. But we stayed there for a second. That was kind of what that bill wanted to accomplish. Now, I want to take it a step further, and I know that the bill still needs to be developed as far as I can tell. And I know some people who are working on it. But the reality is, we got to get to the point where we not only acknowledge that studying the problem is important, but we also can acknowledge that we see a problem, and we might as well start correcting for it. There's no need to sit around and wait for the data to get in and be like, oh yeah, now we should try to do. No, we can do that in one fell swoop. I mean, I don't know if it's going to get traction, but the reality is we need to find ways to do some of the things that Nicole's talking about, right? Connecting people to the primary care system in a stronger fashion. Yes. Identifying our weaknesses and just shore them up, when it comes to folks of color and other marginalized folks. I mean, this is the type of stuff that we have to do in order to make it so our public health system, period, can be made whole, So that's what we're thinking about. It's going to be aggressive in terms of like trying to get this thing together. But the starting point is like a House bill that came out there. And I think there was something similar in the Senate, but I can't remember that number off the top of my head, but
you're right. Further. House Bill 2153 by Delegate Rowe, and so that's it. This is to fund and get some action behind the Minority Health Advisory Team, and just to both of your points, I always see West Virginia as the canary in the coal mine. I mean, what goes on here, it is just, to me, in many ways, a focus group for the greater America. And so, paying attention to, underrepresented minority health is that's like you said, it's a case that has to be made, not because it's the right thing to do, but because it affects the bottom line. And that analogy about the crack to the opioid COVID, that really resonates with me. And I just have one more question, because I know John has stuff he wants to do, but I wanted to just say on connecting people to primary care system, where would people start? So what would be your advice? So, hey, I'm Mrs. so-and-so, Mr. So-and-so, I've never been to the doctor. I go to the emergency room. I don't take any medicine. I'm fine, right? What do you say to that? How does that person get started?
Well, I used to work, I worked in these community clinics called federally qualified health clinics. So they're clinics that are for everyone, but mainly help low income, and they do sliding scale. That's a good way to start. I know that there's a Health Right in the Kanawha Valley region, and I know we have one up here in Mon County that's called Health Right. So that's a start. That's a way to start. But even Google federally qualified health clinics. These are clinics that help everybody, but it's a start. And to get primary care treatment, that's mainly what they do. Some clinics may bring in an endocrinologist once a month or a neurologist. I worked in one in Pittsburgh, and I worked in one in Texas. And they're valuable to the community. The one in Texas was actually linked to a behavioral health center, so we always were able to refer to a therapist or psychiatrist right there on site. They are funded. They're federally funded, so they'll always be around. It's just a matter of getting in. That may be a good way to start. And if you need it, like when I was in Pittsburgh, if the patient needed more care, like more advanced care, we used West Penn. So that was one of the major hospitals there. They had a charity service. So I had a patient who needed surgery. I had to fill out all this paperwork saying why the patient needed this surgery, and she got accepted into the charity program and moved on from there. So these are for patients who don't have insurance or may have not adequate insurance. And some of these federally qualified health clinics has a navigator there on site to help you get on the Affordable Care Act. So it's a start. That's the best way to start. Find a federally qualified health clinic or even a community clinic that advertises for, low income or vulnerable populations. That's the way to start to get connected.
All right. Thank
let me
you.
throw out this real quick. You got to also think about why there isn't one close nearby to where you live. So make sure you're asking your elected officials those kind of questions. Like what Nikki is talking about is absolutely true. Now the question is, as marginalized as everybody is in this state, in terms of just not having resources and things of that nature, why don't we have more of these things? Why does somebody got to drive out to Blacksville, to go out there and get in line for one of these things? What are we doing here? So that's a question. That's a question that's got to go all, to your elected officials. So make sure y'all stay on top of that.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Dr. Carr, I do have a question about a COVID-19 home testing. Is that in the works, or is that already going on?
So all I can tell you is what I've read about, and Nikki, you might, if I say something wrong, you can correct me, but I did see that the FDA just recently emergency approved, I guess, a COVID-19 home test that actually makes it so you don't have to send it to a lab. And that's supposed to be a big step. Now, I don't know when that thing's going to hit the market. One of the things that people are concerned about is when it does hit the market, is it going to be something where people are hoarding it like toilet paper all over again? So people have to be, on top of that kind of game too. But I mean, it sounds like a necessary step. I just don't know when it actually hits the streets in West Virginia. Nikki, you got any thoughts on that? Or any of it?
When it comes to the home test, sometimes they're good if you're symptomatic, because that means there's antigens floating in your, there's COVID floating in your blood that it's going to catch it. With the asymptomatics, that's why those PCR, the DNA, those DNA tests go for the remnant, like that little bit that shows, yes, you are positive. So the nasal swabs work a little different. So I think people need to understand that sometimes these rapid tests or the home test, they are better if you're showing like symptoms. And I do worry that people won't check in and say, well, it was negative, the home test was negative, I'm good. And then you go to work and you're actually spreading. You didn't check in with the primary provider. So that's my concern with it, but I understand the necessity of it.
Now, also another question that I do have for you, real quickly, another question that I do have for you. I want you to go over again for me when you become infected with COVID-19, when are you most susceptible to spreading the disease? I think I remember that there was like a 5 to 7 day period that you were most contagious. And I'd like for you to go over that again because I think that's important information.
It's tough. So usually, yeah, like within that first 5 days, they claim that you are, they may not have symptoms, but you could be still shedding it. I think with the CDC, are they saying up to like the 10th day you're no longer shedding or exposing? Definitely by the 14th day you're no longer shedding it. But it's hard to say. I mean, I know like asymptomatics, think about it. They're not feeling anything and they're not experiencing anything. Yeah. So you do wonder. I think they're saying within 5 days you should start showing signs of it, but do we really know? I don't know. I mean, that's why.
But the one thing about that data,
we're doing the testing all the time. And Mon County is doing testing constantly, saying, "Hey, if you're asymptomatic, come on out," because I think it's every Friday and Monday free COVID testing because it's just that rampant out here. They're just like, come on out, get your testing, so we can at least know who's positive, who isn't. And so far,
but if you're asymptomatic.
Right.
If you're asymptomatic, you're going to be asymptomatic for about 14 days, and then you're going to shed that, right? Am I correct?
No, they're saying
or can you be asymptomatic for months?
I think definitely by the 10th day, you shouldn't be shedding anymore. And Jerry can chime in if he's read something different.
Just this. I mean, unfortunately, all these numbers that we're talking about are like averages, right? So the idea is that within the average, you got outliers. You got things where it's like maybe 20 days, maybe it's shorter, But the average is pretty firm. Don't get me wrong, but just we got to acknowledge the fact that there's variability there in terms of like how far it can go. But it's a strong average, but it's still, you got to be cautious there.
And I definitely know.
Can you be asymptomatic? No, I wanted to ask the question. Can you be asymptomatic for months and have COVID-19 and be spreading it?
For months, I don't know of that. I know that antibodies can be seen 3 to 6 months. I know that. But as far as the shedding, I don't recall anything like that for months of shedding. Okay. And we still don't know. Actually have a colleague that had COVID but never developed any antibodies, so that was a outlier for you. So, and he definitely got the vaccine because he didn't even get any antibodies, but definitely a positive test. So it's a very weird virus that we just don't know enough of. And there's definitely people that I've known who were asymptomatic, got tested, and they were positive. So you're like, okay, you had no symptoms, but you went and got tested. So that's the importance of wearing the mask. So you wear your mask to keep it to yourself. You physically distance to prevent, getting it, and you follow the guidelines the best you can.
Now, from what I understand, they said that initially they said that once you get this, you may develop an immunity from the antibodies from having it. But they I've watched the reports on this, and it seems like they've kind of flip-flopped a little bit, okay? Because at first it was like, well, once you get it, you survive it, you've developed the antibodies, and you're not likely to get it again. But then we kind of got a little flip-flop here based upon the fact that a mutant strain could appear, and you don't have antibodies to this mutant strain, as far as I understand. Okay?
We're definitely hearing that.
I had to ask.
Right.
Go ahead.
We're definitely hearing that natural immunity is definitely not enough. So yes, you can get it, and you can develop antibodies, but antibodies don't last forever. They can last 3 to 6 months and be gone. And there are documented cases of people getting reinfected. Some have gotten reinfected, and it's worse. So they said there's a little difference in the vaccine, in the virus that these people have gotten infected with. So it's strongly advising, at least where I work, they're strongly advising that if you've had COVID, you need to get the vaccine because that gives you a stronger antibody response. And when you get your second dose, there'll be even more of a stronger antibody response against the virus. So that's where we're at right now. So natural immunity is not enough.
Okay, understood. I need to ask you about children and animals. I don't see where a lot of children have gotten this, and I haven't heard too much about animals getting it. But then I have heard that animals can get COVID. Like if you got a house dog or a house cat, they can get it.
Right.
And I'd like you to speak to children and animals.
What I've heard, what I've read so far about children is that definitely children can get it, and they said they still believe that's from an infected adult giving it to the child. We lost a 17-year-old in the state just recently to COVID. As far as animals, the only thing I've thought, I'm from New York, and there was the Bronx Zoo came out and said one of their tigers got COVID from a handler who had COVID. So that the zoo they weren't wearing masks among their animals, but now all the zoos are advising wearing a mask. So it's from like human to animal, not the other way around.
That's what I wanted to know, whether or not it can go, if it can go from human to animal.
At this moment in time, but things change. So
Right. You don't have any reports of it going from animal to human at this time.
At this time, no. I haven't read anything.
I have to check the CDC on that one. I can't.
Right.
I thought there was something, but I could be wrong.
One of the other things that we picked up, real quickly, is that those people who, for instance, remember my family might have been diabetic, but they get COVID, and now they have diabetes. It brings out an underlying condition that you might be borderline ill. Bring it out. Next thing you know, you got a kidney issue, or you got a diabetes when you didn't have it before. So we are seeing that.
Yeah, the virus is definitely multi-organ disease, and that's what's so scary about it. So every specialist over at the university is involved in some type of research or reading up on it, because it can affect the heart. I mean, you can get myocarditis, like inflammation of the heart, the multiple clots. Unfortunately, you have people in the morgue saying that these COVID bodies have multiple clots in multiple vessels of their body. The pulmonary group has said there are patients who are developing interstitial lung disease, very severe lung disease, or asthma. Person never had asthma before, healthy as could be, all of a sudden they've got asthma, or it can affect the kidney. So every specialty is involved. Even dermatology is getting involved because of this whole COVID toes that's been noted. And then some kids can have a weird rash that can come up in some kids that may be a harbinger of COVID. And some patients have noted hair loss. So this is a very serious virus that can affect multiple organs. So I think people need to think about that. Like, you can put yourself out there and say, well, if I get it, I'm not gonna be sick, but you don't know. You have no idea how it's gonna attack the body. And recently, I think, Sanjay Gupta, he put out something about obesity and how the virus loves fat cells. That's why obese people are getting hit so hard with the coronavirus, because the virus has A2 receptors on it. So it likes A2 receptors, which are multiple all over a fat cell. So that's a scary thing to think about, that this virus loves that type of tissue, and eventually kill. I mean, that's what the virus is doing. It's going after your body because it wants to take over you and become the host. So, I think about those things versus the vaccine. I'm like, no, I'm going with the vaccine. But yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Another thing is that we heard that it can also make you, if men get it, it can make them infertile. And I don't know. This is something that I read in the article. So, excuse me.
I heard about that, and that's definitely a myth. And I know Dr. Fauci talked about it in that CNN special, because someone asked that point blank, and he was like, there is no connection between this vaccine and infertility. That's just it's impossible the way that it's made. It doesn't even go near. I guess we call them.
I'm not talking about vaccine. I'm talking about COVID-19. You can get COVID-19.
I haven't heard that, but it's possible because it's a multi-organ virus. It goes everywhere. So I don't know. I haven't read anything personally that it can cause infertility.
I heard that early over in China when they were doing some investigative work in China as a result of the virus. Some of the men were reporting that it caused infertility. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's sterile. It made it sterile.
Wow.
Hey, let's not forget about the brain. I mean, it definitely go to the brain too. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mess up cognitive function.
I mean, major organ.
Yeah.
It
definitely attacks major organs all over. Yeah. And I mean, that's why, they're still considering a long hauler COVID clinic because these patients need to be monitored for the long haul because we need to know what is it doing when you've gotten better and supposedly recovered, but you're still having symptoms. That's the scary thing. You need to be continually monitored to see like what's happening, with each organ. So I know Dr. Marsh has talked about that they need to consider developing a COVID long hauler clinic.
But in many ways, COVID is like the flu because early on people were comparing this to the flu, that it was a weaponized. Some people said it was a weaponized form of the flu. Okay, but you're saying no. You're saying no. This is more deadlier than the flu.
Let's
be clear.
I mean, we definitely lose a lot of people with the flu, but this is not like the flu at all. I mean, the amount of people we have in ICU with COVID needing like this advanced ventilation, and it's very, very serious. It is not the flu. We have a vaccine for the flu that's out there, and you should definitely get it. Everyone should get that vaccine, especially this year because its data is showing if you got your flu vaccine and you do get COVID, less likely to end up in the ICU. So that's good data to go with. I mean, get the vaccine, get what get it. So, but yeah, as far as this being it's not the same. It attacks every single organ, and it can be deadly, or it can be lifelong. You have to deal with it forever. The flu, you get through it, but this, no, it's just terrible.
Yeah,
you mentioned
one thing I'll say about the flu is right now, I got to throw this data out there. I mean, right now, it wasn't that long ago, actually, coronavirus, without even having a head start in the year, is third leading cause of death. I mean, now I think it's like, for this year, now I think it's like, it's got to be number two. It's got to be number two because it's actually just like surpassing, this ain't the flu. Like the flu don't do that, like people are dying way too fast at a clip, for this to be something like that. It's just way more deadly.
You mentioned the 17-year-old that got sick and passed recently from the COVID. Is that right, Nicole?
Yeah,
now, did that 17-year-old?
That was reported.
Did they have an underlying?
They just said Kanawha Valley. They didn't put any demographics, and I was watching the the press conference, the governor press conference. I don't think he said much about it. It's unfortunate to watch the press conference because if you look at the comments, most of the people are saying, "When are we going to shut down?" So I'm like, do they read the comments? Because most of the people on the press conference, when they're watching on social media, they're saying we need to do more than, we lost a child. Like, but I don't know any other details of this person, and unfortunate for that family.
Because when I hear about a 17-year-old passing from it, generally I'm thinking that there might have been some underlying preconditions going on. Because I'd hate to think that a 17-year-old wasn't strong enough to be able to fight this thing off.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know anything about the 17-year-old, but I'll tell you this, that like I said, I'm from upstate New York. I listen to upstate New York a lot, the radio, and New York Langone is a big facility out there. And when back in April, I was telling Jerry, they are having too many black and brown kids get this multiple inflammatory syndrome condition out there, and that was the COVID in kids. They were at that time, it was like 147 kids. And I wrote the governor about that. I said, please consider virtual. I know it's not the best, but the kids, based on what I'm hearing in New York, and I know this isn't New York, and I know people in West Virginia, they hate when you say that. I'm like, what we're hearing is very concerning to me, that I'm hearing kids that are, in the hospital, in the ICU with COVID and our northern, brethren. That's how I think about it. So we should do something. I never got a response from the governor. But we definitely knew we were going to make decisions with our kids because of that. So, we need to take this more seriously in terms of the children. And I understand sports. I understand, football is great here and they love football. I understand people love the bar scene. But I'm sorry, it's a very concerning when you have so many people dying. I think I wrote our president of our university and our governor before when they decided to reopen the bars up here, and they decided to allow, I think it was like 15,000 to attend a game. Those decisions were poor. I'm sorry. They put too many people at risk, and it should never have happened. And now look at what we're dealing with. I'm like, make the decision. I know it's hard, and I think he's scared of the whole militia thing that happened out in Michigan with the governor and at the city cap. But you've got to make the decision that's best for the population, and you have to have a spine to just do it. I don't know what else to do to make him understand that. I write as a constituent, I write as a community member, and I pray other people do the same. But I never get a response back. But we do write and say, hey, this is a bad decision. Please do something.
Has WVU shut down its Nicole? Has WVU shut down its athletics program? Or curtailed as a result of COVID?
I think, yes, there is a hold at this time, but I'm sure they're going to start back up for some bowl game or something like that. But, yeah. But the bars are still, open as far as I know. I haven't seen anything that said, hey, we're going to shut down. And I understand that they need funding. I mean, these bar owners need help. These are small business owners. They need help. So I understand that is needed before you do the whole shutdown. But that's where we come in with the federal government. I mean, and for our state government, they should look at that and say, okay, we got to come up with a plan to take care of them so we can make it through this. Unfortunately, what we're seeing right now, this surge is probably from the Thanksgiving, people visiting and not adhering to guidelines. And here we are coming up on Christmas. So a lot of the healthcare providers, we know, okay, we're going to see probably another one. And then you have the New Year's. So God help us to make it to February. But, unfortunately, you're probably going to see it. I know we've had some drops. So our hospitalization numbers have gone down some. The ICU numbers have gone down some. Not a lot, but some. But these holidays are critical. If you don't follow the guidelines, I think it was Biden who said, a lot of people are going to be sitting at tables with, the empty chair this year. Because how many people have lost family members, friends because of this virus? And you got to think about that. That's dreadful. That's terrible.
Wow. Well, I'm trying to think of another question for you guys.
One thing I want Nicole to do, if you don't mind, Nicole, I know that we were talking about sources, information that was out there that people can use and turn to in order to get information. I just want you to go through some of those sources again, because I know, especially since we talk about Black people, there's some key ones that I know you like to promote here and there.
Okay.
Sources of information.
Okay. NAACP, they did a town hall that was really good. It's still on their site. You can click it. I think it was called Unmasked COVID. And that's where you get to see the main researcher, Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett, really talk about how important it was for her research in terms of the vaccine. You also get to see Dr. Marcela Nunez, who's a COVID-19 task force member. She was selected by Biden, And you also get to see the president of Meharry, which is a HBCU medical school. He also got to chime in. And I think Dr. Patrice Harris was also part of that task force. That
panel.
Webinar.
Yeah, that panel.
Yeah, that panel, if I'm correct. And also the National Medical Association. That's an organization that represents Black providers, Black scientists, and they also have put out several webinars about the COVID-19 vaccine and COVID-19 in general, and they're a good resource. And National Urban League did well. CDC is also a good resource as well. CNN, they put out a panel I think it was just last night about with Dr. Jerome Adams, who's our Surgeon General, Dr. Gupta on it as well, and Dr. Fauci was on that panel. And 2020 put out it was called The Shot. They did a really good presentation, which I'm sure all of this is on demand, where you can also see Dr. Dr. Corbett talk about her involvement in the research. And they also talk about the other vaccines. They also have different researchers and developers who are involved in each one of these different vaccines that are coming out, who talked about their involvement, how they were passionate. Once they heard the data and the numbers, they really dropped everything and said, hey, we need to deal with this COVID, the coronavirus, because it is killing us. So that's the information I've passed on to our membership. Mainly that's what we've been doing, passing it on to membership. They can read it and hopefully go out there and educate the community. And I mean, with the pandemic, you do the best you can with virtual, with the virtual platform. So this is what we do.
Is Biden going to keep Fauci? Does it appear he's going to keep him, or?
Yes.
Yeah, the answer is yes. He's keeping him, and he's actually getting a promotion too, of some sort. So he's going to be promoted to a higher form of advisor or something to that effect. So that happened within the last couple of weeks or so.
Because I heard Fauci say that, I think I recently heard Fauci say that Dr. Chizmikia, she was going to be over top of it. She was going to be running everything. I think I heard him speak directly to the African-American community and call us brothers and sisters and tell us that we should have confidence because the vaccine is covered by an African-American woman.
She definitely is the lead scientist in it, and she's very passionate when you do hear her speak about her involvement in it. A brilliant person. She's only 34 years old, but very brilliant scientist who's all in, But she definitely talks about her concerns about people not getting the vaccine and what could it lead to in the nation. You can have spots that are green because they got the vaccine and spots that are not. So you just wonder, okay, what does that do if you have spots that didn't get it and because they didn't want it and they're red, and what's going to happen with businesses? Are they going to say, well, I don't want to go there. They didn't even get, the vaccine is not safe. Those things, she's actually thinking that way. Like, if we can't, you have to get 2/3 of the population to get this vaccine for us to move forward. And that's going to take time. That's really going to take a lot of time.
I mean, what's crazy right now is the skeptical portions of our population. That Kaiser just did a study not too long ago. We got most skeptical. We got Black people and rural Republicans. And I don't know, man. We got to step back and we got to think. Like, okay, so what's up? Yeah. I mean, it's like, all right, why are we in agreement on this? You know what I mean? What else do we agree on? There ain't many things we agree on, right? Everything on the human rights level to all kinds of different things. There's all kinds of stuff that we see that we diverge, but somehow we're in agreement on this, and that makes me question things. I always look around and I say, who's marching with me when it comes to certain things? And this is one of those questions. So it's we got a lot of disinformation out there. We got a lot of work to do. Because I root for West Virginia, just like I root for my hometown, Detroit. This is the similarities that are, that people don't even catch on to are just, they're there, believe it or not. I mean, you're basically talking about people who have, who are dealing with marginalization, people who have low resources, And sometimes the way we're treated by our leadership and things of that nature, by businesses, the economic effects. I mean, you can almost flip the color line and you get similar conversation. And I feel terrible that, like, sometimes you're looking at a situation where these groups of people, if they actually could get past some of the racial arguments that are out there, they could actually join forces and be pretty powerful, And that's what's sad about this, that I'm looking at these populations as being targeted and most vulnerable in this discussion. I'm concerned about that,
Well, it appears that during the winter months, the virus is most dangerous. It kills the most people. But as you move into the warmer months, where you get more sun, I think I remember reading an article where alleging that vitamin D deficiency was in most of the people that passed from it. Yeah, and so I'm getting the connection that during the warm season, when there's a lot of sun out, that works to knock down COVID. And could you speak to that in terms of, I'm not sure if I'm using the right language, but during the warm season, as the summer comes along, COVID levels, they decrease. And does the data show that?
I think that what's happening. I mean, I don't think California would say that's true, because unfortunately they had really bad numbers and still are dealing with it now. I think one thing is, like, when the colder months, we are inside and we are sharing air, and that's what's a concern. And when it's warmer, when you physically distance, you're going out, you're being more active and trying to physically distance. That's one thing. Definitely, I do think that I think it was Fauci did say that he does take vitamin D as a supplement and vitamin C, and a lot of people do take that because we just don't get enough from the sun, and it does have some anti-inflammatory capability, so it's not going to hurt to just take a multivitamin that has vitamin D in it. But I don't think that it's really the summer, the sun, or the heat, doing it. I think it's us distancing and just being more active. But when you're indoor, I know that there's a Dr. Joseph Allen with the Harvard Public Health Center. It's called the T.H. Chan Harvard Public Health Center. He's actually saying consider an air purifier when you're in the home, or opening the windows like what they did back in 1918.
Oh, I hear the music. I don't know if that's.
I know.
I don't know what that means.
I know, right?
That's our music. I don't know. I don't know if that means that we're headed toward the end of our show or not. I'd love to get 2 hours show. That means that we're headed toward the end of our show. So it's been great having you guys on tonight. And we'll talk to you.